story is not all that creepy, and not a supernatural one, but maybe you'll find it interesting. In winter, my family stayed at our house in a small Eastern European village. The place had quite a lot of animals around it, not just dogs and stuff, but wolves, bears, etc. In winter, it's not uncommon for them to get very close to the village and attack small animals. Also, there was a small water pump station across the field, like a half-kilometer radius from the village. So one late evening, me and my stepbrother have decided to go to the station for no apparent reason. Just for fun, I guess. We kinda knew about the animals, but didn't care too much. The way to the station was easy, if you don't count walking through the snow. We were joking, talking, etc. When we got there, we started some music on my phone, and it continued to be casual. The whole environment, though, was stunning, just an endless white field around us. No sign of people, and a full shining moon in a crystal clear sky. Everything was so peaceful and quiet, but then something horrifying happened. Almost surreal. From the woods, about 50 meters away, we hear multiple, deep, angry howls. Again, keep in mind that we were just two kids alone, somewhat far away from anyone else. We just looked at each other horrified and started walking silently, without saying a word. The way back was intense. We constantly looked over our shoulders. At one point we were pretty sure we saw glowing eyes from inside the trees. It was winter, so we left a pretty obvious track of footprints on the way. We were walking the same path back. At some point we saw a lot of wolf tracks cross our previous path. They were not there when we went to the station. No doubt it was a pack just past the border about 10 minutes ago. We just crapped our pants even more and almost ran home. Nothing else happened that evening. It may not look very impressive, but it was a very surreal, very dangerous, scary experience. This happened about 13 years ago, when I was a sophomore in college, attending a liberal arts school in Suffolk County, New York. Within the first month or two freshman year, I had found myself in a very tight-knit group of fellow theater geeks, 6 guys, myself included, and 1 girl. They all loved horror movies and ghost stories. I had found my crew. Freshman year was tough, but we all held each other up and made the whole experience more enjoyable for one another. At the beginning of sophomore year, we decided that in October, as Halloween season was ramping up, we would find a creepy wooded spot in a nearby town some night and scare the crap out of ourselves. We did some research and found that there was a particularly isolated area about 30 minutes away, infamous for paranormal sightings. Perfect. 7 of us split up into 2 different cars and headed out in the night. Allow me to set the scene. You turn off a busy main road, flooded with strip malls and restaurants and whatnot, and you're almost immediately greeted by complete darkness. Again, this area was heavily wooded. It was essentially a large web of winding roads surrounded by trees, very few streetlights, and very few houses. Without a GPS or a good sense of direction, one could easily get lost in there. We all made sure to have fully charged phones and flashlights, just in case. But the goal was to keep driving until we collectively decided to pull over and go exploring. So per the directions, we made a left off the main road, driving for 30 minutes or so into the dark network, picking directions at random, just getting intentionally lost. Our cars made a turn, and to our surprise, there was a huge log in front of us. We had reached a dead end of some kind, with nothing but trees beyond it. We all got out to see what exactly this was, stepped over the log, and noticed 2 arrow trails leading in different directions. This seemed like a good time as any to grab our flashlights and do some amateur ghost hunting. We flipped a coin and set off on the trail to the right. The trail was so narrow that we had to walk single file to avoid getting whacked by branches. For whatever reason, I ended up in the back. I'm pretty sure rational and level-headed, but I have to say, the further we went in, the more I was overcome with an uneasy feeling. I kept hearing sounds deep in the woods, unable to shake the feeling we were being watched. But I seemed to be the only one who heard these things, so I shrugged it off as my imagination. And in any case, the whole point of us being out here was to get scared. Not to mention the fact that there were 7 able-bodied college students. What could we come across that could take us all down? We headed down the trail for about 20 minutes, and just when we thought it would never end, we came to a massive clearing. And I mean massive. It was a large open field of unkempt grass. Comparable in scope to a golf course, but not nearly as well manicured. Trees surrounded the entire field, which was so large, we could not even see the end of it from where we were standing. I was thrilled to get out of that narrow trail, but I don't think any of us were expecting to find an area so vast. One of us looked to the right and said, "Hey, check that out." We all turned, and there was an old, dilapidated house several hundred yards away. The house was completely dark, with no cars or signs of anyone. We walked over and shined our flashlights at it, and sure enough, the doors were all boarded up. I managed to peer between the boards on one of the windows. What I could see was an old white couch covered in plastic, but an otherwise empty room. Whoever used to live there, they were long gone. Because there was no way in, and because we all felt sufficiently creeped out by the house anyway, we decided to walk closer to the trail we had come from, and have a seat in the field, and figure out where to go next. We walked towards the narrow trail, but before we could sit, my friend Mark stopped what he was doing. His expression dropped, and he pointed. We all turned. On a very far side of the field, directly across from where we had come in, we could see someone tall, lanky, and pale dancing among the trees. And by dancing, I mean he was skipping around, grabbing a tree, swinging around it, then doing the same to another tree. Basically a doozy-doo. The moon was so bright and the woods were so dark, it actually took a second for us to realize what we were looking at. Jay, the 6'4" skeptic of the group, wasn't seeing it. I leaned into him, pointed in that direction, and said, "Jay, look where I'm pointing. Don't you see that?" He squinted a bit. The second he saw it, he gasped with everything he had, clutched my arm, and whispered, "What the hell is that?" What happened next sent shockwaves through all of us. Whoever this was, they stopped dancing, looked in our direction, and started charging straight at us. Without even thinking, we freaked out and ran back to the trail. Yet again, Jay was the only one who didn't see what was happening. He shouted after us, "Guys, what is it? What are you doing?" After about 15 seconds of running, I heard Jay scream. I looked back and saw his flashlight following the rest of us to the trail. While the walk into the woods took about 20 minutes, we made it back in our 2 cars. Hopped in, peeled away. Once we were a safe distance away, we pulled over, got out, and checked in with each other. My heart was pounding, and I know everyone else was feeling the same. Nearly 15 years later, we're all still friends, living in different states, yet keeping in touch. Occasionally, out of the blue, one of us will send a group text to the effect of, "The woods, that really happened, right?" It most certainly did. The experience is always in the back of my mind, and I'm pretty sure it always will be. Here's the thing that still resonates with me about that. Whoever that was, they were dancing maniacally in the woods at 1 a.m, and then ran directly at a group of young adults, not at all fazed by the fact that they were severely outnumbered. Did he know we were from the school second we parked? Was that the sound I kept hearing when we walked the trail? Whatever the case, when he came for us that night, you can be sure none of us wanted to stick around to see what he was truly capable of. Whatever you do, don't stare at the trees. My father was always a very cheerful man. Even after his divorce, he always kept a smile and loved to tell stories about his younger days. We usually go grocery shopping together. It was a nice way to spend some time together, and of course a great time so he can tell me one of his stories. Most of them are quite harmless, teenager fun and the like. Like the time he got stuck in high school all night while trying to impress a girl, or the time he fought 6 men by himself because they were throwing rocks to a dog. A lot of his stories are of the times he traveled to Mexico to visit family. My grandpa had an old pickup he used to lend to my father so that he and his friends could travel. One of those old and reliable trucks, he always said. One day, they were driving home from Walmart, and I asked him, "Have you ever seen a ghost?" Of course, I've seen my fair share of paranormal stuff, like that time in Urizaba when me and your uncle were chased by a UFO. He started telling the story as cheerful as ever. No, but like something truly scary. Did you ever? I've never told you about my cousin Carlos, right? His expression changed like he was going to tell me a secret that no one else had ever heard. No, I answered, now perplexed at the sudden change of tone. Well, we have 30 minutes, I guess it's enough time. With that, he told me one of the scariest stories I've ever heard. When we were 16, maybe 17. I think Marcelo was 15. I'm going off track. So I was 16, and your grandpa said I should visit my Aunt Anna at a little town in central Mexico. He was very fond of family and wanted to make sure I get to meet everyone at least once in my life. So me, my cousin Carlos, and Marcelo, and my friend Karen, we took the truck and headed south to the border to this little town which I can't remember the name of. Anyway, it was a 2-day road trip, mostly listening to the new 8-track I had just installed. So we get there, and my aunt and uncle live in a small orange farm outside town. And just as if it was meant to be, the truck died about 8 miles before we get there. We pushed the truck to the side of the road and just walked the rest of the distance. Aunt Anna was surprised when we got there on foot, but after we told them what happened, he asked my uncle to help us with the truck. He obliged and went back to try to fix the truck. We walked a little, and my aunt, and being teenagers in the 70s, of course we asked Aunt Anna if there was a disco in town. She said there was one, but it was on the other side of town, about 1 hour walking distance. Not too bad, so we told her we were going to go there and check it out. My aunt just frowned a little and told us to be safe and return before dark. At that, we headed to the town to check the place. It was a pretty small place, mostly just a couple pinball machines and a few arcades, but good enough to have nice conversations and a few laughs. After a while, it gets dark, but we were having a nice time, so we didn't realize. And by the time we did, my aunt was already there, scolding us for not doing as she said, but happy we were safe. She said that since it was late, we need to go through Central Plaza, a very big park with a lot of trees and an old abandoned military base. Just as we get there, she stops, looked at us and said, "We are going through the plaza, and I want you to ignore the trees. Don't look at them, and stay together, no matter what." Her tone was very serious, so we were very afraid. But after a couple minutes, as the dumb teenagers we were, we started joking about and trying to spook each other. It took about 10 minutes to pass the plaza, and when we got to the other side, we noticed that Carlos wasn't with us. Aunt Anna told us to stay right there, again to not look at the trees and wait until she came back. At that point, we were scared. Marcella and Karen were almost in tears, and I was ready to fight anything that came out of the trees. So Aunt Anna came back 5 minutes later with Carlos, who looked pale, and believe me, I've never seen anyone as pale. It was like he was an empty white shell. It looked as though something had taken his very soul. Barely able to walk, and with his eyes wide open. Unfortunately, the farm was only a few more minutes away. We did get there, though. So we get to the farm, into the kitchen, and my aunt puts Carlos on a chair and starts preparing coffee. Naturally, we were all shocked, and no one had said anything up to that point. I asked my aunt what happened. She explained that about 100 years ago, that plaza was basically the death row from this town. Anyone who had committed any crime bad enough to deserve death was hanged right in the middle of the plaza. No one knows how many, but maybe 1,000 people's souls were trapped in that plaza. All over the years, people learned to never go through it at night. As she was saying this, she took some coffee, as black coffee can be, added 4 spoonfuls of sugar, and gave it to Carlos, whom at this point was more or less looking better. He took the cup and drank the coffee full and just stared at the table. We immediately turned our attention to him and asked what happened and what did he see. After a few more minutes, he started telling us. He was just behind us when he heard someone yell in the distance. When he turned his head to see where the sound came from, he froze. He saw hundreds of eyes in the trees. Hundreds of glowing eyes with red pupils staring at him. Then the faces started to appear. They were purple and swollen, some at weird angles. Then the bodies, men, women, and even a couple kids started staring at him. Not moving, just staring. After that, he said all he remembered was the strong and sweet taste of coffee. No one slept that night. And with that, he ended the story. I asked him what happened later. He just laughed and said, "We were all teenagers. By the next morning, we were joking about it." To this day, I don't know if that story was true, but just in case, I always make sure to avoid staring at dense trees. You never know.